Alright everyone, in this video we will look at some principles for chord voicing. How to voice your chords in a way that both helps the realism and just the orchestration and arranging part of making your track. What we have here is the chord progression project from like the composition chapter. But I've taken one of these chord progressions that we combined or made by combining two existing chord progressions, and I want to show you how to like change the chord voicing of this progression into something better. So let's just listen to it first to have somewhere to start. So there we have our chord progression, and it's not a bad chord progression at all. It's just that you see these chords, they're just jumping in the exact same positions from chord to chord, just jumping around with your hands on the keyboard without really having an organic way of moving from chord to chord. So what we will look at now is how to voice these chords, which means like where we put these different notes to make it sound more real and to follow some of the standards of 4-part voice leading. So let's look at the basic principles here. What we want to do is to have each voice go the closest way to the next chord. So say here, from this chord, see it's jumping up like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like 7 steps, right? And these voices are all jumping in the same direction with the same distance between the notes. What we want to do instead is to have this chord change to the next chord by going the shortest way possible. Right, so if you want to go from this chord to this chord to this chord the shortest way possible, I will have to kind of avoid these jumps. So what I see immediately, these ones are not too far from each other, so we want to stay like in this level more or less, right? So I would take this one and I would just take it up an octave, which I now hit shift and up. Take it up an octave. Now you can see that this note, it's not even moving. That's something that's good when it comes to chord voicing. You want as little movement as possible within reasonable measures, but this is really nice because having one note that stays across two different chords is gonna make everything feel more connected and more organic. And here as well, you can see this note as well. Now only just taking this up an octave, suddenly we have two notes that are the same. They are common notes for the two chords. So it's only this note that's moving and only 1/2 step up. See, from here to this one. Only the bass that's moving, but you have to do that to change from one chord to another after all. So we have been achieving less movement here now. Let's see, going to the next chord. I'll move this over here. You can see again, we're starting to get, less movement. Let me see if I take this one down, maybe we get even less movement going on. And you see here, we got some common notes here in these two chords. And these ones are only moving down, a little step. And another bonus trick when it comes to chord voicing is that optimally you don't want parallel movement, which means that all of the notes are going in one direction at the same time, like this. See that all the notes are moving downwards, and then upwards, because this kind of movement is gonna enhance the effect that you're just playing chords on a keyboard rather than a string section playing an organic harmony part. So you don't have to really overthink this too much. Sometimes you want to have some parallel movement. because of the effect of it. But I mean, that's one of the main principles of 4-part voicing. So what you see here is that these ones are staying. This note is going one step up, while these notes are going down. So we have like different directions of motion. You have like the one that is stay, one is going up, one is going down. To the next here, you see it stays, these are going down, these are going up. And you see to the next one, this one is staying, this one is going down, that's one is going down. But it's okay, because we have like this one is, it's still staying there, so it's not parallel movement on all of them. So see, already here now, we have quite a bit of difference. We have something that's moving a lot less. It's jumping less around. And let's listen to what it sounds like right now. And this is already sounding a lot better. Actually, let's just like redo everything else and see what it sounded like before. I mean, this is not too bad. Sometimes you want this kind of harmonies that, or voicings that follow the chords, like in Hans Zimmer's Time. There, that is, you know, one of the carrying elements of the theme, which is, you know, so there's no rules really. It's just that sometimes when you want that cohesive sound, you want to usually, you know, look at the chord voicing. But if we go into here now, I've been, you know, doing these changes on all the chords, making them go the shortest way to the next chord, just as we looked at. And let's see what it sounds like. That sounds a little better. It's starting already to sound a bit more like, you know, an actual harmony section, a string section playing harmonies rather than just some kind of string chords and a string patch with a keyboard. This becomes especially clear if we are playing melodic, melodic elements over it. Let's just improvise a little melody here. Now, it becomes a bit messy sometimes when the chords are jumping so much around, but let's try with these chords that are a bit more cohesive and, you know, one unity. As you can hear, it sounds a bit better when you have been looking at the chord voicing. Now, I mean, there's also more stuff you can do. If we move over here, we got this little chord progression going on. Super simple, just a completely normal chord progression. Now, what we're going to do is that we're going to step for step just, you know, change the voicing of this progression into something better. So here I have the same chord progression in strings. All right. So just as we did earlier, we want to make sure how we can go the closest way to the next chord. So I'm going to keep this chord as it is. So I'm going to do like we did in the previous chord progression, which starts the same. It starts with the same 4 chords as we have here right now. I'm going to take this, I'm going to take it up an octave so you see that these are common notes. This note is just staying here for 3 chords. So I'm just going to like link those together. And the same you see happen here. I'm just using the glue tool here in Cubase to glue them together. And let's see if there's any other common notes. We seem to have one here. And that's it. But if I move this up, let's see. No. Well, let's see if I take this down, if that's really going to help anything. Not really, but you see you have now this parallel movement instead of everything going up, 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 except with this one staying, you know, I'm taking it down so we have a bit more contrasting movements going on. And you see this one is going up here at the end, while this one is going down, so we have a little bit better voicing going on. Let's listen to this. That sounds quite a bit better than what it used to. Now, we have been looking at some ways earlier on how to spice up our chord progressions, and that's just something I want to quickly show you guys now, because this really starts to become more magical when you play around with the chord voicing. So here, I've taken the same chord progression, but I've just added some additional notes, like some ninths and so on. Let's see here. It's a little bit messy, not like perfectly pulled off, but what's going on here is that I have a 9th resolution here, or like a sus2 really. That's resolving down to the roots, and then the same thing again. Here it starts normally, but then I introduce the 9th note here, because that's the top note on the next chord, so I introduced it a bit early. And here we have a sus4, the chord that's being resolved. I just did a little quick, super, simple little example here on how you can use the techniques we looked at earlier after you've been looking at the chord voicing to make things even more realistic. But realism is something we're going to look at in a lot of the coming videos. I just wanted to quickly demonstrate the techniques and principles of chord voicing for harmonic writing and arranging in general. So that's it for this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
Alright guys, it's time to continue with some very, very basic but extremely important fundamentals of orchestrating your tracks. So we're going to talk about some of your main elements here: the melody, the harmony, and the texture. And also a little bit about how to use orchestration for them. So when you're going to start orchestrating your tracks, maybe you're even, recording a little bit around in your DAW and playing around with things like I have been doing here. Either way, you need to keep in mind that less is more. At this stage, you want to focus only on the essentials that we created in the last chapter. And one of the great things with the orchestration form is that you're kind of limiting yourself. You're not adding in random things like new elements, but you're assigning elements to the limited sections of melody, harmony, counter melody, textures, and so on. And you've already been writing these things, so every time you put a new instrument into, say, the melody or the harmony or the ostinato box of your orchestration form, you are not adding any new musical elements, but you're just doubling and expanding on what's already there. And this is going to give you a bigger, more cohesive, more powerful and tidy, clean sound. That's going to sound bigger and more complex than it really is. Because if you have any idea for some instruments you want for any melody, harmony, or other part in any section, just fill that into the orchestration form. We want a few elements that are so well structured and written that they fill out the entire audible spectrum pretty much, rather than a bunch of poorly written elements fighting for space and making just a mess in your orchestration and your mix. And you might remember that in the counter melody chapter, we talked about separation through range, rhythm, articulation, and tone color. You also want to keep in mind that for all of your elements, you want to follow these kind of guidelines. You want the melody to sound separated from the ostinato and from your chords and from the counter melodies and so on. Failing to do so will usually result in a very messy and cluttered arrangement. Check the audio and image examples below this video for a little example of the importance of this. If you haven't checked them out yet, I recommend that you just pause the video right here and just go down and check them out, because they can quickly give you a little idea of what I'm talking about here. Now, another little tool before we get into more things here is what I call the reverse composition check. So say we have this little theme that I play that goes like this. And so on, What I like to do is to just play it only on piano, or arrange it for only piano using your mouse if you have to. Because if the main elements are well written and interesting, combined in a structured way, it will sound good, like when you're playing it only on the piano. Most good compositions sound good if you strip it down and play it only on the piano, like if I take, like, say, Two Steps from Hell. And so on, so you can check if something sounds compelling and interesting and it's like kind of moving you when it's in its most naked form, it will sound good when you orchestrate it well. If it doesn't sound good with only the piano simplified, it's likely not the best composition. I think it was Einstein that said, if you cannot explain something simply, you simply don't understand it well enough. And there's a lot of truth to that. But similarly, I feel that if you cannot perform your composition simply, like with a solo piano, it is simply not written well enough. For example, there are way many things going on at once without really anything, taking the attention as the main melody, or maybe the different elements are crashing together, creating a mess. Or maybe it just doesn't sound compelling and interesting enough. Maybe your melody is not written well enough to be interesting on its own. And if this is the case, just go back to your theme and see how you can fix this. Maybe it's a lack of good separation, maybe it needs a change of harmony, maybe there's not enough of a top point in your melody to really engage your listener, maybe you've not, been using good motif development, or so on. But the thing is that if you strip things down to only piano, finding the problems with your composition, at least to me, becomes 10 times more easier, than trying to figure out what's the problem when you have been arranging it for 100 instruments and you're just trying to find the problem. The easiest way to me is just to strip it down, take it to only piano, and play around with that with only the harmonies and the melodies, and maybe you have the counter melodies too. Because then your main problems are quickly gonna become very apparent and you can fix them before you move on. Now, let's take a quick little example and see how I've separated the different elements in this little composition. So we have this little theme, and I've just, played the melody, I guess, in some violins and woodwinds here. Created a little ostinato in the background on the piano, and just played some chords in strings. And I think we might have a little counter melody in the cello as well. So let's just listen to it, and we'll have a little talk after that. So that's a quick little arrangement I did for that very track. Now, it's not like anything special, but what I've been doing is that I've been trying to achieve some separation. And if I wrote this into my orchestration form, and this is the first A section, I'd write, oboe and flute for the melody together with the violin, like first violins. Then I would probably write that they're being doubled by the violas, which seems to be happening here in octaves. So that would go into my melody box in the first A section. Now, I would also write in the counter melody section, I'd write this little cello melody. As you can see that, this is like the little counter melody that's moving when the main melody is resting, as we've been discussing before. Because, we already have all these main elements written, and it's now just about assigning them to different instruments. So, we also have these little chords that I just play in strings, really, like string chords. And that's something I'd write into the orchestration form as well. And then we have this little quick ostinato thing in the background in like piano and harp and something like this. And this is also something I'd write into the ostinato section or other or texture, depending on how you're using the form. Now, let's say I want to create a bigger arrangement of the same thing. Now, guess what I would do? Like, if I want a second A section like this, I would not just, add in random things or play any random things with the different instruments here. What I would do is that I would look at the orchestration form and I would assign new instruments to the existing things, keeping it simple. Maybe I would add some staccato strings to double this quick ostinato in the background. Maybe I'd add a horn to the counter melody in the cellos. Maybe I'd double the melody by adding in some legato choirs, singing like some kind of long sustained notes. You see where I'm heading? Like, I'm always just adding in extra things. Maybe I'd add in some low brass and some other low woodwinds to help fill out the chords. Maybe I even wanted to add in like a little synth, like a little pad to double the strings in the next section. And if I have that in mind, I'll write that into orchestration form as well. Because when you keep doubling down on these things without just adding in a bunch of random things, your orchestration is going to sound 10 times bigger. It's going to sound way more organized and clean, and your mixes is going to be so much more clean and wide and powerful. So remember to keep things simple and keep separation in mind. Like, if I open up these things right now, like one melody, one counter melody, and I'm going to take just a bass note to keep things simple in the MIDI here. You can see that everything is separated fairly well. We have the melody and the counter melody, which are in the same range, but they are separated by rhythm. One is moving while the other one is resting, and the other way around. Then we have the ostinato, which you see is the highest element here in terms of range, but it's also, different articulation and different rhythm. It's quicker than everything else, it's higher up than everything else, and it's playing short notes compared to the long notes in every other element. So we have some good separation going on here. And again, we have the chords which are, existing in this kind of space with the bass and the extra chords here. So they are also different in rhythm because they're just long and sustained while everything else is moving, and, they're in a lower range. So as you see here, I've been getting a fairly okay separation. And even if you see there's some overlapping, the rhythms and the tone colors are so different that it's not going to be a problem at all. And the beauty about this is that when, like, say if I decide to add 10 instruments on this one, 10 instruments on that, 10 instruments on this, 10 instruments on that, the separation is still going to be so good that it's going to sound massive without sounding too cluttered or sounding too messy. So when you keep things simple, use the orchestration form, double down on what's already there instead of just adding in a bunch of random things you don't really need, you're going to end up with a so much more clean and pure orchestration and a better mix. So to summarize, keep things simple, focus on writing a few good and well connected elements rather than a mess that you're trying to sound okay together, and keep separation in mind at this stage, as it's going to be crucial to getting a good mix, a good orchestration, and a compelling composition in general. Now let's move over to the next lecture, where I'm going to go through the principles for achieving a clear foreground, middle ground, and background in your compositions. I'll see you guys there.
All right, everyone, we're back again, and this time we are going to talk about picking your instruments or picking the right instruments for a section. Because this is a question I've been getting quite a bit, actually. It's a lot of people have been asking me, like, how do I know which instrument to pick for this melody or for this harmony or for like the entire section? How do you know what to pick? What is the right instrument? What is the right approach? This is what we're going to have a look at in this video. We're going to look at my personal approaches to picking out the right instruments, quote unquote, and how you can take these techniques and apply them on your own. But first of all, I need to just put in a little note here. There is no right way of doing any of these things. There are no right instrument for like this or that situation. There are no like rules or limits that should dictate your choices. It all comes down to your artistic vision. Your artistic vision dictates what the right choice of instrument is. There's no rules or no theory or no one else that can tell you that you can or cannot use an oboe. It's totally up to you. So if you find yourself in the first place composing music and you're trying to like find some kind of rule or system for which instruments to pick, I need you to stop right there and really start thinking through what you're doing, because this is maybe one of the biggest parts of the creative like endeavor that making music is. It's your subjective artistic freedom, your freedom of expression in any way that you want. No one can tell you that it's wrong to use a flute here or you can't use a cello for this. If it sounds good to you, that's all the proof you need. You don't need anything to back it up. As long as something sounds good, you have made a good decision. That said, you should try to have some kind of basic knowledge about the different instruments you're writing for, as this is the only way that you can fully make reasonable decisions based on your artistic vision and create a well-crafted orchestration for the given instrument or group of instruments. So try to have some kind of basic understanding of the instruments, which ranges they sound best in, which ranges they don't sound good in, how the tone color is changing based on the range, how the loudness is changed based on the range. And because if you have a melody and you feel, say, flute would be a great fit, you have to make sure that you put the melody in a range where the flute's brilliance can be, portrayed in a good way, rather than a tricky and bad sounding range that's hard to play for the flutist and doesn't really bring out the best in the instrument or the player. Now, with all that said, let's look at my approach for like picking the instrument for a certain melody. All right, so let's just take this little piano thing here, and we're just gonna create a little quick orchestration from this. Let's listen. All right, so we have this super simple little melody, or at least the beginning of a melody slash theme. We have, two chords here. Let's see if I can play them. Oops. So I have a chord there. We have a chord here, and we have a little melody. And then some little, I don't know if I can call this really counter melody, but yeah, let's call it that. Just like this descending motion kind of that's going on to create some more movement in the theme. So those are the three elements. It's nothing more. We have this melody, we have this descending little thing, and then two chords. That's it. So three elements. All right, so that's what we have to work with. Now, what I like to do when trying to figure out the kind of instrumentation, I mean, let's face it, usually it's kind of an autonomous process. Like I just know that I'd like this kind of instrument or this kind of feel, and I just like, do it. I just play around and something happens. It's not really a structured approach. But if I'm trying to break it down, my first concern would be, what do I want to be in focus? What do I want the melody to sound like? What kind of tone color do I want? And this also depends on the context. Like, is there something dictating what kind of instruments I should be picking? Say, if you're working on a movie score or a short film, there might be things in the story and things in the character or whatever your theme is for that might kind of limit or open up possibilities for which instruments you should be picking. Or maybe even the director has some kind of preference, like, hey, I want the main theme to be a bassoon or something like that. You never know. But as long as that's not the case, you're the one who makes the call. So whatever instrument you feel would be the best fit for the melody, that's the best fit for the melody. There's like no rules besides trying to, make a good melody for the characteristics and the ranges of a given instrument. So the best way to really just do this is to play around, in my opinion, just see what the different instruments sound like. So say here, I think I record the melody in oboe. Let's listen to that. And I personally love the sound of the oboe, so maybe that's something I would like to go for here. Or maybe I know I want something very, very mellow and atmospheric in the beginning. Maybe I just want some kind of even simpler thing than this. Um, let's say I just take some strings that are playing a high drone, and I just want some very light violins playing the harmony and melody. Then I would play around with that and see what that sounds like. Or maybe I want something more full. In which case, let's say I would maybe just lay down some of the chords here, right? And I think that's what I did over here, to be honest. I think I just copied over exactly basically what was going on in the piano with the descending counter melody and all. So say I decided to go for a string arrangement of this, which, let's say I just want to make sure I'm not playing anything else here. Sounds like that. Oh wait, we got some choir action going on. Let's take that away. All right, so we got it here. And say that's cool. Let me just duplicate that so we have another copy if needed, but, or actually, no. So let's say I don't want this descending line to be in strings. I want that to be in something else. That's just something I feel at this point. Let's say that. All right, but I know that I want some kind of main solo melody instrument. And maybe it's a little bit too much to just go straight into, full strings here with something like this. Maybe I want something more intimate. So again, let's take the oboe. Let's take the oboe like as an example. Since I recorded that, let's just copy it over here. That sounds pretty nice, but let's get in this descending little motion here and see what we can do. Now, we know it's going like this. Let's record that. All right, so we're one step further now. Let's see what this sounds like. All right, that's something. We're getting somewhere. But say that I feel the melody is lacking a little something. Maybe I would like to have it project through a little bit more, like we talked in the doubling video, and maybe I'll add like a little violin melody to, fill out the melody in the oboe. I'm just gonna take it down a little bit so it's a little bit more intimate. Just a little detail, really. Like that. And say maybe I even want the flute to double the melody, just to add a little bit more of that color to it as well. We have this result. So I have a little woodwind melody there, and maybe I want the clarinets to be doubled by the violas or something like that, just to also double the counter melody, so we have some kind of balance going on, and also to like enrich the quality, because I like to combine violas and clarinets sometimes. I find them to blend pretty well together and create an interesting texture. So let's see what it all sounds like right now. All right, there we go. So now we have a little theme here actually with all the elements. And if we open this view so we can see everything that's going on, you can see it's just the same thing. It's just a melody that's being doubled. You have the chords with a descending motion, and that's it. That's everything that's going on here. So I basically just picked and assigned these three elements to different instruments that I personally feel would be a good fit. And then I've been doubling these things to create the size and intensity I'm going for, and the tone color, not at least, that I'm going for in the example, to spread the different elements across the orchestra and create this result. So when you're trying to pick the instruments, try to think about which kind of emotional response you'd like to get across. Then use the instruments and not at least the articulations that you feel portray these emotions. To me, it's more about the articulation plus tone color of an instrument that I get in mind, rather than the instrument itself. For example, if I knew that I wanted something dark and kind of ominous, I'm not thinking, oh, this instrument or something like that, but usually I start thinking about the feeling of the sound, which I guess would be like a deep dark sound with some texture. This would lead me to ways to achieve this color, which I could achieve with, say, a low note with double basses, cellos, bass clarinet, contrabassoon, and bassoons, plus a tuba or something, you know. I do the double basses and cellos for some low round warmth as a bass, adding the sort of nasal, intense texture of the low woodwinds, like the bassoon and contrabassoon, because these have their own tone colors, mixed with a full yet minimal brassy tuba, instead of horns and trombones, which are a bit more too sharp and overpowering for my vision here, for example. So when picking instruments, I don't just think of the instrument as it is, but like the tone color and emotion and articulation I can get out of it, and how this will change the emotion of my piece. And then, I'm trying to find something like an instrument or a combination of instruments that together would kind of create this color or create this texture. So that's the way I usually go about it. So now let's listen to this thing again and just see what we came up with super quick here. All right, so we started with this little thing, melody. I'm sorry, let's see here. I started with this little thing, the melody, little counter motion here, and some chords, 3 layers. And I created this kind of, warm, mellow string and woodwind theme with this. But I could have made it like super dark and, with a lot of brass and choirs. I could have done practically everything or anything, and it would sound totally different. But this was my choice. This is like how I decided to color this theme through the use of different orchestral instruments. So I hope this has been, showing you a little bit about how you can approach picking the right instruments, and really that it's nothing to worry about. Just go with whatever you feel will sound the best and whatever you like the best. And this is the beauty of samples, because you can actually try out different combinations and different options and just settle on the one you prefer the most. So that's it for this video. We're going to head over to some other tips and techniques now, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Hey everyone, in this video we are going to start talking about some practical and easy to understand orchestration guidelines. And in this video we will be talking about doubling. So doubling is basically when you take one instrument or one melody and you combine it with another instrument or several instruments. And when you start making orchestral music and you start orchestrating, you are bound to encounter situations where you have to double a melody line or harmony line, or where you just need to combine instruments. So we're going to go through a little rule of thumb when combining instruments. So I want you guys to just think of the orchestration as kind of painting, because every instrument has its own color, and the combination of these colors yield different results. Because you already have the harmonies, you already have the melodies, you have like the main motifs, the objects in the paintings you want to create, but the choice of instruments and the act of combining these instruments is going to dictate the tone color you're going to get out. So when you're combining instruments, think of it like painting. You already have the motif, let's say a house by the sea. You have like the melody and the chords, but orchestration and the instrumentation is kind of going to be the decision of how you choose to do the brush strokes, which colors you choose to apply, and how you choose to combine these colors to finish your composition. So, when doubling, think about tone color and not range. If you want to double a flute melody, don't just reach randomly for, say, the trumpet, just because it is in the same kind of range. Like flutes are high, so I guess trumpets are high too, so let's combine them, right? Not really. The best way to go about it is to rather think about the tone color you want to achieve and try to match instruments of similar tone colors that add to the existing sound. For example, making a flute melody more rich, thick, and vibrant by doubling it with violins, or giving it more roundness and warmth by adding a clarinet melody an octave below. You'd usually want to double for one of these two reasons most of the time. Either you want something to become louder and bigger, or you just want some kind of specific tone color that you cannot achieve with only one instrument. So you're going for the color. For example, if you have a flute melody again, but the harmony layer is too loud. For example, little brass chords or something, right? And you might probably want to strengthen the flute melody to make it more audible, to pierce through and be heard past the brass chords. Or maybe only have a piano and harp plus maybe some low strings doing the chords, and you don't really need to go any louder, but you want a more unique color for the melody. You could double it with violins just because of the kind of distinct color they create together. Now let's just have a little listen and play around with some different examples here. Let's just take the flute here and listen to this melodic line that is just like four notes breaking down a C major chord, I think. So I have this little flute melody here. Now, if I want to double this with any other instruments, I would have to ask myself, which kind of tone color do I want? Because any other instrument that combine with this is going to change the color of the sound. Let's see what happens if I add an oboe. Or say, the violin. Or maybe only violin and cello. Or maybe I want it a bit more round and warm and I add a solo horn in there. And so on. You get my point. Anytime you introduce or change some kind of instrument playing a certain part, you're going to change the tone color. So the decision of which instrument to double your existing melody line with is going to be what kind of tone color do you want to achieve. How do you want to color the sound that's already there? Do you want it to be a bit sharper? Do you want it to be more round and full and thick? Do you want it to be piercing and, these kind of things. So that's the kind of questions that dictate which instruments you should pick. Now, it's usually nice to take some instruments that have some kind of similar tone color, just that they kind of expand on each other's qualities. Let's take the violins as an example. The violins has a pretty bright and brilliant, yet kind of warm and thick sound to them. Violins has a brilliant and bright sound to them. But if I combine them with the flute is not drastically different. The flute also has like this light and fairly bright feel to it. It's a bit more full and round. So by adding the flute to the violin melody, I'm gonna fill it out, make it a little bit more rounded off. And it sounds like this. So these instruments are kind of filling out empty spaces in each other's qualities in a way. The flute is making the violin melody more rich, more full. That said, let's move over to like a little example here. I think I took some chords, like a string chord thing, and just these same melodic movements on top of it. So let's just play around with a few different combinations of instruments and just see how it affects the color of the sound. Let's start with, say, clarinet and strings. So the clarinet has a fairly round sound, but if I add this flute legato thing to it as well, it's going to become even more round and airy. It's gonna have a lot more air, feels like it's breathing a bit more. Now, maybe I want to combine some violins and octaves with it, and we're gonna get a totally different kind of sound. I'm just gonna add the basses here too to kind of balance the melodies out. Alright, let's see how the tone color changes if I like switch out the clarinet and flute and strings, or I mean violins, with cello. Let's take that. I'm gonna give it a more dark and rich tone color. But the cello is kind of close to the horn too. They both have a rich, deep tone color, so let's combine them and see how that sounds. And we have a totally different result. Let's take everything together, which again is going to blend a lot of tone colors and give us a more washed out, just big orchestral feeling. So yeah, the combination of, and doubling of instruments just basically depend on the kind of tone color you're going for. Let's take just this little theme I have right here and just show you a quick little example. So I have this little theme that goes like this with a flute and piano. Let's see if we have a little only piano. No, we don't. All right, so let's take this theme and just listen to it. Okay, so say this is like the beginning of one of our themes. But in the second half of this section or something, we add some choirs to the strings, which kind of fill out and give them a thicker quality. Let's listen to that. And maybe we add some more basses or something like that to the harmonies, but whatever. Now, the situation I'm in, I might like to double this flute melody both to give a different tone color that's going to be more distinct and pierce through the harmonic backgrounds because we have quite a bit of strings and choirs here. So just like a little flute melody might not be that audible in real life. So say I want to double now. I'd have to ask myself what kind of quality I would like. And since I want the melody to stand out a bit from the harmonies, and the harmonies have this kind of warm and round texture to them. Maybe I'd like the melody to stick out a little bit more. At the same time, I don't want it to sound misplaced, so I want something that's a bit close to what's already going on. So just my immediate first bet would be, say, violins for this example. The first violin's doubling the flute melody. Now this will give it a little bit different tone color. It's gonna give it some more power to pierce through. It's gonna make it a little bit more sharp and bright with the texture of the violins, and it's gonna thicken out and like just make the melody line a bit more rich. Let's listen to what that sounds like. So yeah, that's a quick little introduction to the principle of doubling instruments. So just keep in mind, try to double by tone color and not by range. When you need to double something, think about what kind of tone color would I want to achieve and what instrument can I use together with the current instrument, and also a little bit based on the instruments that are playing, say the background or something like that, to make it blend in yet add to the music, add to the tonal quality of it. Something that expands on what's already there. So I hope this little video was helpful, and we will move on to some other orchestration techniques. I'll see you guys soon. Alright, boys and girls, it's time to look at chord voicing, but not just in a traditional sense, but how to voice bigger chords. Which notes to double, which notes to not double that much, and so on. And this is super, super crucial to getting that clean, pure, big, balanced orchestral sound in your recordings, and not just end up in some unbalanced, muddy mess. So let's just dive right into it and have a look at this little C major chord, completely normal. So this kind of resembles the kind of chords we have been looking at so far in the course. Just a standard chord with, a bass and then a triad on top. Nothing more, nothing less really. But say you want like a bigger chord, like either big orchestral statement or a hit, with all the instruments playing one chord quickly or something like that, But let's say you want a bigger orchestral statement, like a big orchestral chord or, something like that. And you want a chord that's more like this. Let's just take it up a little bit here. Something like that. Now, if you want to do that, there are some pretty important guidelines to follow to not make it end up sounding more like this. You can argue how bad this is really, but let's listen to just the clarity and the balance of these chords. Difference. This is a, nice, clean, vibrant C major chord, like a big C major chord. This is more like a muddy, unclear, weird thing. So let's look at these ones side by side and see the difference here, because we're going to orchestrate this now for, a bigger ensemble and see how that affects the sound, in an orchestrated way. But let's look at some very important guidelines. First of all, when it comes to voicing in bigger chords, there is one rule of thumb that's super important, and that is open spacings in the low end in the bottom and tighter spacings in the top. And that's what you see I have been doing here in the balanced nice chord. It's a whole octave you see in the lowest part of the chord here. It's a fifth up to the next one. Then you have the roots again. You see it's very open here. there's not a lot going on, but then it gets closer and tighter as we get higher up in the range, in the pitches here. While in the muddy one, you can see there's a lot of closed spacings in the low end, but more open in the high end, which is like the opposite of what we really want optimally. So one way to make this chord more clear is to open up the spacings in the bottom here. If I take this and let's say that, and just like, you know, take it up a few octaves. This one too maybe, or just delete it all together so we have a closer voicing in the top and, you know, less close voicing in the bottom. Let me also just take away this. We're already probably gonna have a better result. You see, now it sounds a lot more open and balanced than it did in this position. Right? Okay, so that's fundamental number one. Close voicings in the top and open ones in the bottom. And this is because the overtones that these notes create, if you have a lot of them in the low end, all the overtones that they combine together are gonna crash and they're gonna create this mud that you can hear here. Versus this. Alright, we got that now. Then let's head over to the next important principle, and that is the doubling of the notes in your chord. So as a rule of thumb, you shouldn't just, you know, double any note in this chord just, you know, as far as it goes. You're not just doing this and, you know, Control C, like paste and one octave up and then, you know, pasting it another octave up. That's not really the way you usually go about it, because there's a certain, again, you know, rule of thumb to which notes to double and which ones not to double that much. And it goes like this. First and foremost, you want to double the root note. This is a very safe bet. The root note is very balanced, and you can just stack it on top of each other, you know, like as many times as you want. I have 4 octaves in this chord. And I mean, yeah, 4 octaves of the root note here. So that's definitely the most common note in my chord here. Let's see, C, 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 C. Actually, there's like 5 C's in this one. So most of it is just C's. I probably wouldn't like have needed 5 of them, but in general, the root note is the one you want to double the most. After that, what you want to double the second most is the 5th. And that's what I've been doing here as well. I've been adding the 5th here. See, here as well, we have a 5th in the G, and we have another 5th. So I have 3 5ths as well, as you can see. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 2 5ths in here, as you can see. We have it over here, and I think we have it right there. So, that said, I mean, you can guess which ones are left after that. We have the 5th, we have the, you know, the roots, 5th, root, and root, right? I'm sorry, I mean 5th and root on the bottom. So, you can see what's left here. It's an E, which is a major third in the chord of C major. So we have only one, which leads me to the third, which should be doubled the least out of the 3 main ones. Because this one has a bit of tension. The third has a bit of tension. If you double too many thirds, it's just not going to sound that good. It's going to be an unbalanced chord, and this is one of the most common orchestration mistakes beginners usually make, is that there's too many thirds in their chords. So I only used 1/3 here in a chord with like, what is it, 9 or so notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. One of them is a third, 5 of them is a root, and 2 of them is a 5th. I could probably distribute it a bit better, but I mean, you know, over exaggerating these things just to, you know, show you the principle. Now, let's look at the, you know, quote unquote bad example. Let's see how many root notes we have here. We have 1, we have a C here, we have a C here where's nothing, and yeah, we have only 2 root notes, and they are all over here. Right. So that's bad. When only 2 out of 8 or so, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in this case, when 2 out of 9 notes into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. When 2 out of 9 notes in a chord is a root, it's not going to be too balanced because you need to really establish this root to make the chord sound balanced and grounded in a way. Now let's see how many fifths we have, which should be, less than this, and it can't be just mathematically right now, probably. We have 1 here, which is a G. We have another here, another G. Then we have a third G over here, and actually a 5th G. So we have like 4 different fifths in this chord, which is twice as many as the root, which is clearly not following the rule of thumb we just talked about. And finally, we have a third. We have another third here, another third. So we have like more thirds than we have roots, which is clearly not what we want. That's going to result in a very unbalanced sound. So the combination of too many thirds and too many fifths compared to almost no root notes, combined with a very narrow voicing in the low end, is going to give us an unbalanced sound like this. Alright, so we get those principles now. After this, you probably... Now, let's look at this in an orchestral perspective. Let's listen to this chord. Alright, it's a chord, but, listen to it again. Do you feel it sounds balanced and full and rich? It doesn't sound too bad, but listen to this as a comparison. Sounds a little bit more balanced and rich and clean. Now, let's listen to or look at the voicings here. And again, you see it's the same chords that I've been using twice here. The first one sounds a little bit muddy, and a bit hard to define, while this one sounds a bit more balanced. And it's the same voicings going on. I just copied the piano chords and just spread them out for the orchestra with some strings and some brass. But I hope this kind of, gives you look into why you want to space things out in the bottom, keep things closer on the top, and mostly double the root notes. Now, that said, this does not only apply to actual chords you're spacing out throughout the orchestra. This also applies to your general main elements and the arrangement of these elements. For example, if you have 4 elements, you have a harmony, you have a countermelody, melody, and ostinato. You would also like those elements to follow this kind of guideline. You would want to follow this kind of structure with the basses down low. You have maybe some chords on top of that. And then as you get higher up, you might have the melody and the countermelody a bit closer, and then let's say the ostinato on top of that again. That might be a good way to do it, but what you don't want is to have like the basses down here, the melody down here, the harmony down here, the ostinato like here, and something else like, also very low. Because all those things is gonna clash. You want some things to be on the bottom with a lot of space to the next element, a bit less space to the next element, a little bit less space to the next element, and so on. So you want to kind of mimic this kind of spacing for everything you do in terms of orchestration and arranging. Now, on the earlier example of this, some people said that they actually preferred the sound of the closed, like low, deep voicing because it sounds kind of like this Inception big Brahm with a brass instruments. And for those people, I added a little extra chord here in the ending to also show you how you can achieve these kind of low, really brutal chords with without messing up the chord voicings too much. You can still follow these principles and get these really low, nasty chords. At the same time, sometimes you want this low spacing, this really closed low spacing, because it gives a muddy and kind of, brutal effect. And that might be something you desire sometimes. So, all rules are there to be broken when, you want to get something out of breaking that rule. But in general, try to follow these principles. Let's head into that final little chord I think I made here. Yes, there we go. So here we have a little chord, and I'm just gonna play it to you, and you'll see what I mean. So this is obviously not like super well produced. I just play the chords, but let's just look at how they are voiced. You can see here again, I have an octave, and then we have a tighter spacing up top, even though the entire chord is fairly, in a low range. But I still use the same principles, and the chords sound fairly clean. And as we talked about earlier, when doubling, just double down on these things. You can just make things sound bigger and bigger, but doubling the same elements with the different doubling and spacing principles in mind. So I hope this has been a helpful video when it comes to voicing bigger chords and making your mixes and orchestration sound more clean and balanced. Let's head over to the next video, and I'll see you guys there. Hello students, in this video we will start looking some kind of basic principles for orchestrating bigger statements. This means kind of going a step further from just transferring our piano sketches into smaller orchestrations, but how to size things up into these kind of big climaxes that you can hear in orchestral music, where like the entire orchestra is involved, more or less, or a bigger portion than what you have been previously using. So let's look at some very basic but extremely crucial principles here. First of all, simplicity is key. When you are sizing up your ensemble, you want to double what's already there instead of just adding more. Like, instead of adding more melody lines, like adding in smaller elements and, whatever, you should rather try to just double down on what's already there. And I'm going to show you what I mean. Because things usually sound more complex than they really are when you listen to things from, film scores and game scores and trailer music, especially those big orchestral pieces. Because when you listen to them as a listener, you might sometimes be tricked into believing there's actually more going on that there is. But it's not sounding so complex and well written because there are necessarily so many elements going on, but rather because there's just a few elements that have been written and orchestrated so well that they take up the entire spectrum of space and attention. With proper separation between the elements, they are well put in like a foreground, middle ground, and a background role. There are nice textures, everything is, the orchestration is balanced, where all the layers that are playing can be heard properly, and so on. So think about tone color, and so on. So, try to keep things minimal and rather double down and make sure the things that you actually have there are as good as they can get. Because that's when you really get those huge, amazing, big orchestrations. Now, let's take the same example again. This little piano melody here. Alright, so we have this little melody. We have all three elements in here. Now let's have a look at how I would go about orchestrating this in like a bigger orchestral statement. Okay, so in the previous video we did this little, string and woodwinds theme that sounded like this. Right, it's a very intimate and small orchestration of this theme. But say we want to go for something bigger, right? What you would still do is the exact same principles, but with doubling. So you see how I have all those, just three elements: melody, counter melody, and harmony. When I'm talking about simplicity, is that I would only add onto these existing layers and not add anything new. If I go into like a bigger orchestration of this theme, you would still only see this. There would not be anything more. I would only be doubling what's already there. And this is what's going to give you that clean, huge, but structured orchestration. It's because every element has a purpose. You're not just throwing things in there just to make things sound louder and bigger, just throwing stuff at a wall. That's not what we're gonna and see what sticks. That's not the approach we're gonna do here. So I've been making just this little super quick orchestration in, a bigger kind of orchestral statement. Let's see what that sounds like. It's not like the biggest thing you've ever heard, but I'm keeping it simple here just to get the different techniques and points across in a simple way. So, if I open this now and we're gonna see at what's going on here, it's a little bit messy, but let's have a deeper look at what's going on here. First of all, you see the characteristic melody here, which is doubled in octaves, as you can see. The movement is, exactly the same. So these are doubled in octaves. Next, we can see the bass notes here for the two chords, like that are played in 3 octaves with brass and strings. And then we have those, the downwards counter melody motions that are also played in 2 octaves here. And we have the same chords as it was in the piano. So what we basically have here is the same 3 layers. 2 octaves with the melody, 2 octaves for the counter melody, and like 3 octaves in the bass. You see, everything is doubling what's already there. So let's look at what's going on individually here. So as usual, we have the woodwinds. Oh, let's see. As usual, we have the woodwinds. They're playing the melody in octaves. And the same is happening in the strings. In the violins, I mean. So see, I have the violins playing the melody in octaves, I just copied, the melody that was over there. And the same is happening, you see, in the woodwinds. Same thing, they're just playing the exactly same stuff. Then if we continue further down, you can see that we have the cello playing the counter melody together with the horns in unison. That's what's going on there, and I think we might have some choirs in here that I accidentally muted. Let's listen to that. You can see the choirs are doubling the chords here with the little counter melodies at the same time. So they're just like filling out some background space and adding a little bit of, space and warmth into the chords and the counter melody. Just kind of gluing everything a bit together. And then I think at the bottom we just have, some low brass playing the bass notes. And that's basically everything that's going on here. So you can see that I've only been doubling. Oh, yeah, we have the chords with the strings and the downwards little counter melody here as well in the violas. So that's it. That's everything that's going on here. You can see I've taken the exact same things as in the piano sketch and just sized it up. Wait, let me see here. I've just been taking this and, just been putting it in an octave over, doing the same thing here and spacing out the harmonies a bit. But it's the exact same notes, just assigned to different instruments in octaves to make it sound bigger. And we're going to talk and look at, bigger chord voicings and doubling and how to effectively do this to make it sound clean later. I just wanted to quickly present this kind of, mindset of doubling what's already there instead of just adding in new stuff, because that's one of the biggest problems I see composers do that are inexperienced but they want this big orchestral sound, is that there are too many elements at the same time in the big orchestral sections that are just fighting for space. So double down on what's already there, your melody, your harmony, your counter melody, ostinato, whatever it is. Only use that. So that's why I sometimes like to create a little piano sketch and just, really keep things simple and assign it to different instruments to not make things sound messy. Now, another little thing regarding tone color. Think about tone color when you double each element. Because when you're making a grand orchestration and you only have like three layers or so, you're doomed to double most of these layers, like I had to do here. If you have a flute melody, maybe you put flutes and piccolos in octaves together with violin 1 and violin 2 in octaves as well, which is basically what I've done just with flute and oboe, violin 1, violin 2. And I've been like, these blend together pretty well as we have previously explored. Now maybe you'll make the cellos and horns do a little counter melody like I did here, while something else, it could be trombones and low woodwinds cover the harmonies, or, you can also have oboes and clarinet and harps doing arpeggiated textures in the back, and bam, you have like 4 layers doubled across most of the orchestra, but still only 4 different layers of music. In my case, I only have 3 because I don't have any like textures or fancy things like that. I'm just keeping it very simple. So keep this principle in mind when you are going through your orchestration journey in this course, and I'll see you guys in the next video.